Early morning at the training ground, mist rising from the concrete as the whistle signals the first day of boot camp. A group of male recruits burst into laughter, pointing at the small girl in her faded t-shirt and worn-out shoes. Seriously, who let the janitor in? She doesn't respond, just kneels down to retie her shoelaces. Her calloused hands tremble slightly, but she pulls the knots tight. During morning runs, during mess hall meals, she continues getting shoved around. Food trays knocked to the floor, mocking laughter echoing through the barracks. But during one hand-to-hand combat training session, her shirt tears open, revealing a mysterious tattoo on her back. That makes the entire camp freeze in shock. If you're already hooked from the first second, hit like and subscribe to HL Stories. Trust me, what comes next will leave you breathless. She was 20 years old, small frame, carrying worn-out boots and a faded backpack. Nothing about her stood out in a place designed to break the weak and forge the strong. Fort Benning's reception center buzzed with the controlled chaos of new recruit processing. Drill sergeants barked orders while fresh-faced civilians tried to transform themselves into soldiers. Among the crowd of nervous young men flexing muscles and trading tough guy stories, she moved like a shadow. The boot camp environment was unforgiving by design, a crucible where the loud and aggressive earned respect, while the quiet and small became targets. She fit perfectly into the second category, at least in the eyes of her fellow recruits. "Look what we got here," laughed Private Jackson, a 6'2" farm boy from Ohio who dominated high school football. "Did someone's little sister get lost?" The group around him erupted in laughter. She kept walking, eyes focused straight ahead, ignoring the comments that followed her like smoke. "Hey, rookie," another voice called out. "You sure you're in the right place? The cleaning crew reports to a different building." More laughter, more pointing, more evidence that they saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience that somehow slipped through the cracks of military recruitment. During mealtimes, the harassment escalated. Jackson and his crew would deliberately bump into her in the chow line, sending her tray clattering to the floor. Food scattered across the linoleum, while dozens of recruits looked on, some laughing, others just grateful they weren't the target. She would kneel without a word, collecting scattered pieces of her meal, cleaning up the mess, while her tormentors walked away satisfied with their dominance display. No tears, no protests, just quiet acceptance that spoke of deeper conditioning. The morning runs told a different story to those paying attention. While Jackson huffed and struggled through the 3-mile course, she maintained steady breathing and perfect form. Her small frame moved with mechanical precision, feet striking the ground in rhythm that suggested thousands of miles logged in preparation for something far more demanding than basic training. During weapons familiarization, subtle details emerged that didn't match her rookie status. The way she handled the M16 rifle showed familiarity that went beyond the brief instruction period. Her grip was natural stance, perfect muscle memory, engaging in ways that spoke of extensive prior training. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with sharp eyes for spotting ringers and phonies, began watching her more closely. Something about her movements triggered recognition patterns in his experienced mind. "How does she field strip that weapon so fast?" he wondered aloud during a break between exercises. "Rookies don't move like that." Her personal effects revealed nothing unusual. Standard issue clothing, basic toiletries, no photographs or personal memorabilia that might hint at her background. Just the essentials and a small leather journal she wrote in each night, its pages filled with notations that looked more like tactical observations than diary entries. The other recruits had given up trying to engage her in conversation. She answered direct questions with minimal responses, longer explanations, only when absolutely necessary from instructors. They assumed she was overwhelmed, intimidated, maybe even scared. They couldn't have been more wrong. At night, while others slept or wrote letters home, she would sit by the barracks window, staring out into the darkness. Her eyes moved in patterns, scanning, cataloging potential threats, calculating distances to key terrain features. It was involuntary behavior, like a pianist's fingers unconsciously tapping melodies. The upcoming hand-to-hand combat training would change everything. As the instructors prepared to test their recruits' fighting abilities, none of them suspected that their weakest link carried skills that would redefine everyone's understanding of what strength really looked like. Jackson was already bragging about which recruit he'd be paired against for the demonstration matches. He had no way of knowing that his casual cruelty was about to meet something far more dangerous than his high school football experience had prepared him for. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The hand-to-hand combat demonstration took place in the main gymnasium, a cavernous space that amplified every sound and magnified every moment of triumph or humiliation. Drill Sergeant Martinez had arranged the recruits in a large circle, the fighting mat positioned at the center like a Roman Colosseum. "Today we separate the warriors from the wannabes," Martinez announced, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Combat isn't about size or strength. It's about technique, timing, and the will to survive when everything goes wrong." The first few matches proceeded predictably. Larger recruits dominated smaller ones, farm boys with natural strength, overpowered city kids with soft hands. Each victory was celebrated with cheers from the winner's friends, while the defeated slunk back to the crowd, nursing bruised pride along with their physical injuries. Jackson had been lobbying to face her since the exercise began. "Come on, Sergeant," he called out with theatrical confidence. "Let me show the rookie how this works. Might as well get her education started, right?" His buddies laughed and cheered already, anticipating the entertainment value of watching their designated victim get thoroughly dominated in front of the entire company. Martinez considered the pairing for a moment, then shrugged. Sometimes lessons came from unexpected sources. "Rodriguez, you're up against Jackson. Center of the mat now." The crowd pressed closer as the two fighters took their positions. Jackson stood 6 inches taller and outweighed her by at least 60 pounds. He bounced on the balls of his feet, shadowboxing, for the crowd's benefit, playing up the obvious mismatch for maximum dramatic effect. She simply stood there, arms at her sides, breathing steadily. To the observers, she looked resigned to inevitable defeat. Some of the recruits actually felt sorry for her, wondering why the drill sergeant would allow such an unfair match. "Begin!" Martinez shouted. Jackson moved forward with cocky aggression, throwing a wild haymaker designed more for intimidation than tactical effectiveness. He expected her to flinch, to back away, to give him the easy takedown that would cement his reputation as the company's alpha male. Instead, she stepped inside his swing with fluid precision, her small frame suddenly becoming a weapon of geometric efficiency. Her right hand found his wrist, controlling the punching arm, while her left elbow drove upward into his solar plexus with surgical accuracy. Jackson's breath exploded from his lungs as he doubled over, his eyes wide with shock and sudden oxygen debt. Before he could recover, her legs swept behind his knees while her hands guided his unbalanced body toward the mat. The takedown happened so fast that half the observers missed the technical details. One moment Jackson was throwing a confident punch, the next he was flat on his back staring up at the gymnasium lights while trying to remember how to breathe. Silence filled the space where cheers and laughter had been moments before. She released him immediately and stepped back, assuming a neutral stance, while he rolled onto his side, gasping for air. No showboating, no victory celebration, just professional competence that spoke of training far beyond anything offered in basic military instruction. "Lucky shot," someone called out from the crowd, though the voice lacked conviction. "Just caught him off guard." Jackson struggled to his feet, embarrassment fueling anger that made him reckless. Instead of acknowledging defeat gracefully, he charged forward with raw fury, determined to salvage his reputation through sheer aggression. This time her response was even more decisive. She sidestepped his bull rush and grabbed the back of his shirt as momentum carried him past her position. The fabric, already strained from the physical activity, couldn't handle the sudden stress. It tore down the back seam with a loud ripping sound that echoed through the gymnasium. As Jackson stumbled forward, her torn shirt fell away from her shoulders, revealing skin that told stories no recruit should possess. The tattoo covered most of her upper back, an intricate design featuring a coiled serpent wrapped around a skull surrounded by symbols that made several instructors suck in sharp breaths of recognition. Below the main image, a series of military designations, in script so small and precise they looked like they'd been applied by laser rather than needle. The silence that followed was different from the earlier quiet. This wasn't shock at an upset victory. This was the recognition that they were looking at markings that belonged to units that didn't officially exist. Staff Sergeant Martinez, who had seen those symbols once before, in classified briefings, felt his blood pressure spike as understanding hit him like physical force. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered, too stunned to maintain his drill instructor composure. That mark, it's not supposed to exist. Every person in that gymnasium was staring at her back, trying to process what they were seeing. The small, quiet recruit they dismissed and mocked was standing in their midst, wearing proof of involvement in operations that existed in the darkest corners of military legend. The game had changed completely and nobody knew the rules anymore. Commander Sullivan pushed through the circle of stunned recruits, his face draining of color as he focused on the tattoo that had transformed their understanding of everything. "Everyone back to barracks, now!" His voice carried an authority that brooked no argument, but his eyes never left the dark angel wings and burning cross design that marked her as something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The recruits shuffled away reluctantly, casting confused glances over their shoulders. Jackson, still catching his breath and nursing his wounded pride, seemed completely unaware that he'd just been taken down by someone whose combat credentials existed in classified files he'd never have clearance to read. When the gymnasium emptied except for the senior staff, Sullivan approached her with the careful respect normally reserved for visiting generals or Medal of Honor recipients. "Soldier," he said quietly, "we need to talk." The flashback hit her as she pulled the torn shirt closed, memories surfacing unbidden like fragments of a nightmare that refused to stay buried. 3 years earlier, in a different life, that officially never happened. She'd been 27 then, not 20. One of many lies constructed to give her a clean slate in a world that had already tried to kill her once. The unit had no official designation, no parade colors, no public recognition. They existed in the spaces between government departments handling operations that required deniability and people who could vanish without leaving awkward questions behind. Her team had been the best of the best operators pulled from Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Special Forces, and intelligence services that most citizens had never heard of. Each member carried skills that represented decades of training and real-world application in conflicts that never made the evening news. The mission in Eastern Europe had been routine by their standards. Eliminate a war criminal who'd been selling weapons to terrorist organizations while hiding behind diplomatic immunity. Clean, surgical, no collateral damage, no fingerprints leading back to American involvement. Instead, they'd walked into a trap that had been months in the making. Someone with access to classified information had sold them out, turning their surgical strike into an execution ground designed to eliminate witnesses to embarrassing political arrangements. The firefight lasted 6 hours. One by one, her teammates fell to enemy fire that seemed to anticipate their every movement. Marcus, the team leader who trained her in advanced marksmanship. Sarah, the communications specialist who could hack any system and still find time to crack jokes that kept morale high. Davis, the demolitions expert who collected vintage postcards and sent care packages to orphanages in countries they'd operated in. All dead, all officially listed as training accidents that occurred at classified locations under circumstances that couldn't be disclosed for national security reasons. She'd survived by playing dead among their bodies until extraction teams arrived and found what appeared to be a complete unit loss. Instead of reporting her survival, the field medic had made a decision that saved her life and erased her identity. He declared her KIA along with the others and smuggled her out through medical channels that didn't ask inconvenient questions. Months of unofficial rehabilitation followed. Surgery to repair damage that officially never happened. Psychological counseling to process trauma from missions that never occurred. Identity construction to give her a life that could withstand background checks while keeping her far from the political machinery that had already tried to kill her once. The tattoo had been applied during her final week with the unit, a bonding ritual that marked them as family in ways that transcended official military structures. Each symbol told part of their story. The serpent represented stealth. The skull honored fallen comrades. The script contained coordinates of operations that would never appear in history books. Commander Sullivan had encountered that tattoo design once before 3 years ago, when her unit had extracted his reconnaissance team from a situation that should have killed them all. He'd never learned their names or official designation, but he'd never forgotten the professionalism and capability they demonstrated under impossible conditions. "Rodriguez isn't your real name, is it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She met his eyes for the first time since arriving at the base, and he saw something there that made him understand why his instructors had been puzzled by her performance. This wasn't a 20-year-old recruit learning basic military skills. This was a ghost wearing a costume hiding capabilities that made their training exercises look like children's games. "No, sir," she replied, "but it's the only name that matters now." Sullivan nodded, slowly processing implications that stretched far beyond his boot camp's usual concerns. Having someone with her background in basic training was like discovering a master craftsman pretending to learn carpentry or finding a concert pianist in beginning music lessons. "Why here?" he asked. "Why this life?" Her answer came after a long pause, weighted with memories of teammates who would never answer roll call again. "Because sometimes starting over is the only way to stay alive, and because someone decided I needed to disappear." The transformation in how others perceived her began immediately. Word spread through unofficial channels with the speed that only military gossip could achieve. By evening, every drill sergeant on the base knew that their problem recruit was actually a walking legend, whose survival had cost more lives than most soldiers would see in entire careers. Jackson and his crew would spend the next several weeks walking on eggshells, suddenly aware that their casual cruelty had been directed at someone who could have killed them all without breaking stride. The change in atmosphere was immediate and profound. Word had spread through the base with the efficiency that only military gossip networks could achieve. But unlike typical barracks rumors, this one carried the weight of confirmed truth. Jackson, whose confident swagger had defined his boot camp experience, until now moved through the following days like a man walking through a minefield. The recruit he dismissed as easy prey had revealed herself as something from his worst nightmares. A professional killer whose capabilities existed in realms he'd never imagined. During morning formation, when she took her usual position at the back of the group, conversations died to whispers. Not the mocking whispers of before, but the reverent murmurs reserved for celebrity sightings or supernatural encounters. "Did you see how fast she moved?" Rodriguez whispered to the recruit next to him. "I've never seen anything like that. It was like watching a different species." Private Mitchell, who'd participated in the food tray incidents, now went out of his way to avoid even accidental contact. When their paths crossed in the narrow barracks corridors, he pressed himself against the wall, unable to meet her eyes, haunted by the knowledge of how easily she could have ended his harassment permanently. The drill sergeant's treatment of her evolved as well, though their professionalism prevented the dramatic changes visible among the recruits. Staff Sergeant Martinez, who'd witnessed her takedown of Jackson, began incorporating her performance into his training lectures. "That's what real combat effectiveness looks like," he told new groups of recruits, careful not to identify her specifically, but making his point clear. "Size doesn't matter, strength doesn't matter, training and technique matter. Never underestimate someone based on appearances." During mess hall meals, a curious ritual developed. Instead of the isolation she'd previously endured, recruits began leaving small gestures of respect on her table. Extra dessert rations appeared without explanation. Fresh coffee materialized when her cup emptied. Nobody spoke to her directly, but the message was clear: the community that had rejected her now sought to honor her. The most significant change came from Commander Sullivan himself. During the daily company formation, when he reviewed training schedules and made announcements, he would acknowledge her presence with a subtle nod that carried weight far beyond its simple appearance. The gesture meant everything to those who understood military protocol. A base commander doesn't nod to recruits. He barely acknowledges their existence as individuals. But he does show respect to fellow professionals, to warriors who've earned recognition through sacrifice and service. That nod transformed her status from outcast recruit to honored guest, someone whose presence elevated the entire training environment rather than diminishing it. Young recruits who arrived in subsequent training cycles heard different stories about boot camp expectations. Instead of the traditional warnings about drill sergeant harassment and peer pressure, they learned about the importance of respecting every team member, regardless of their apparent background. "Don't mess with the quiet ones" became unofficial wisdom passed down through recruit generations. The person you're laughing at today might be the one who saves your life tomorrow. The transformation extended beyond simple fear or respect. Some recruits began seeking her out during training exercises, hoping to learn from someone whose expertise transcended their instructor's capabilities. She remained characteristically quiet, but occasionally offered brief technical corrections that improved their performance dramatically. "Adjust your stance 2 inches left," she might say during marksmanship training, and suddenly a recruit's accuracy would improve from barely acceptable to expert level. These interactions became treasured experiences, stories the recipients would carry throughout their military careers. I once trained with someone who, they would begin before sharing accounts of brief encounters with excellence that changed their understanding of what was possible. The base's unofficial mythology grew around her presence. New recruits were told about the woman whose tattoo revealed connections to operations that existed only in whispered legends. The stories evolved with each telling, but the core message remained consistent. Never judge someone's capabilities by their appearance, because the most dangerous people often look the most ordinary. The community that had mocked and dismissed her now protected her privacy with fierce dedication, understanding instinctively that her anonymity was both armor and weapon in a world where the wrong people might still be looking for someone who was supposed to be dead. After completing basic training with scores that quietly set new base records, she made a choice that surprised everyone who knew her story. Instead of accepting assignment to elite units that would have welcomed someone with her background, she requested posting to support roles that kept her far from combat operations. Commander Sullivan had offered her opportunities that most soldiers could only dream of. Special operations units that operated with minimal oversight, intelligence services that valued her unique skill set, training positions where she could pass her knowledge to the next generation of warriors. She declined them all. "I've had enough of the sharp end," she told him during their final meeting. "I want to serve, but I want to serve quietly." Her choice mystified those who understood what she was walking away from. Elite operators spent their entire careers seeking the kind of recognition her abilities could have earned. Instead, she chose administrative roles, logistics positions, assignments that utilized her intelligence, while keeping her away from situations that might require her to kill again. But legends have a way of growing regardless of their subjects' preferences. The story of the mysterious recruit with the secret tattoo spread beyond Fort Benning through the informal networks that connect military bases worldwide. Each telling added new details, stretched the truth in directions that made her seem less human and more mythical. Drill sergeants at other installations began incorporating her story into their leadership training. There was this recruit they would begin before describing the importance of recognizing potential in unexpected places. The details varied. Sometimes she was described as former CIA, other times as military intelligence, occasionally as foreign special forces on exchange programs. None of the stories captured the complete truth, but they all conveyed the essential message. Assumptions about capability based on appearance could be catastrophically wrong. Young officers attending leadership courses heard sanitized versions that emphasized the importance of developing every soldier's potential regardless of their background. Senior enlisted personnel shared more detailed accounts that highlighted the consequences of failing to recognize talent when it appeared in unexpected forms. The tattoo itself became part of military folklore. Descriptions circulated through secure communication channels shared among personnel who might encounter similar markings in operational environments. Intelligence briefings included references to dark angel wings with burning cross, designations without explaining their origins or significance. Her actual service record remained unremarkable by design. Performance evaluations described competent work in administrative roles, steady advancement through enlisted ranks, no disciplinary problems or noteworthy achievements. She had successfully constructed a career that satisfied military requirements while maintaining the anonymity that kept her alive. But those who served alongside her in various assignments carried different memories. They remembered the way she moved through dangerous overseas deployments with calm confidence that seemed to bend reality around her presence. They recalled her uncanny ability to predict security threats before they materialized, her skill at diffusing tense situations with perfect timing and minimal violence. Staff Sergeant Chen, who worked with her during a deployment to Eastern Europe, would later describe the experience to his wife. "She was like having a guardian angel on the team. Things that should have gone wrong just didn't. I never saw her do anything dramatic, but somehow we always came home safe." The legends grew stronger with time and distance. Veterans who had known her personally found that their stories were met with skepticism, then wonder, then requests for more details that they couldn't provide without compromising operational security. She became a ghost story told in present tense, a reminder that extraordinary people moved among ordinary soldiers without announcing their presence or capabilities. Training instructors used her example to teach humility, respect, and the importance of nurturing every team member's potential. New recruits arriving at basic training facilities learned about the woman whose quiet competence had redefined an entire base's understanding of strength and capability. The stories served as modern parables, teaching lessons about judgment, respect, and the hidden depths that ordinary people might carry. Her legacy lived in changed attitudes and modified behaviors, rather than official commendations or public recognition. Drill sergeants were more careful about allowing harassment of quiet recruits. Officers paid attention to soldiers who seemed to possess skills beyond their apparent experience level. Entire training programs incorporated lessons about recognizing and developing hidden talent. Years later, when military historians attempted to document the cultural changes that improved basic training environments, they found references to an unnamed female recruit whose influence had rippled through multiple installations. Her identity remained classified, but her impact was measurable in reduced harassment incidents, improved unit cohesion, and enhanced respect for individual differences. The woman who had wanted only to disappear had instead become an enduring symbol of the extraordinary potential that might exist in anyone willing to serve. Never judge a person by their appearance or circumstances. The quiet individual in the corner might possess skills and experiences that would astound you. The person who seems out of place might be exactly where they need to be for reasons you can't comprehend. True heroes don't announce themselves with fanfare and dramatic gestures. They move quietly through the world, intervening only when necessary, seeking no credit for actions that might save lives or change outcomes in ways that history will never fully document. The greatest strength often lies in restraint rather than display. Someone capable of extraordinary violence who chooses peace demonstrates wisdom that surpasses those who resort to force as their first option rather than their last resort. Respect costs nothing but yields dividends that compound over time. The person you treat with dignity today might be the one who stands between you and disaster tomorrow. Kindness to those who seem powerless is never wasted because power takes many forms and reveals itself when circumstances demand action. The most dangerous people are often the quietest ones, and the most remarkable stories belong to those who never tell them. If you believe these untold stories deserve to be heard, hit like and subscribe to HL Stories. You're the one helping us continue bringing you truths that were never meant to be revealed.